Hello, I'm Arnold Thurm, and my partner here.
I'm Charlie Rippel.
Well, and as you probably remember, with Focus and Marvin Shapiro, we did the story on the Statue of Liberty earlier this year. And this is kind of a related story.
It's a companion piece. The two go hand in hand.
On
Ellis Island and immigration.
And of course, you probably know the Ellis Island is very close to the Statue of Liberty and really closer to New Jersey.
New Jersey it is, yeah.
Yes, rather than New York State. And now going way back, wasn't this called Gull Island?
It was called Gull Island. It was called Little Oyster Island because that's where the Indians used to farm the oysters. Mm-hmm. And it was just a blip in New York Harbor, only a couple of feet above sea level. And I think it was how many acres?
3.3 originally.
3.3.
Yes. And then, of course, it grew to around 30.
About 30 acres, yeah.
30 acres. And how did it grow to 30 acres?
Around 1900, when the subway system went into New York City, they needed a place to deposit the fill. All the excavated fill went out to Ellis Island.
And I also heard that the ballast from ships that came in were also added to that to make the head. And there was an agreement between New York and New Jersey, as I understand, that all of the fill part of it that made the island larger belonged to New Jersey, even though it surrounded the part that New York already claimed.
Yeah.
So it did present a bit of conflict for a while, but how was that settled, do you know?
I think New Jersey went out with that.
Well, they did come to an agreement where the whatever funds they took in would be divided between New York and New Jersey. All right, now going back, I think it was around 1770. Was it a man named Ellis?
Ellis was a tavern owner, yes, and he inherited this property. And Ellis Island was many things in many different decades. It was a fort. It guarded the lower New York Bay area, along with Governor's Island and Battery Park, and several other government installations, federal installations.
Mm-hmm. But the government bought the island from Ellis, wasn't it, in around 1808, as I understand?
I believe so.
Yes, and so since then it has been called Ellis Island.
Yeah. It was also a place where they hung pirates as a warning to other pirates offshore. Mm-hmm. It was called Gibbet Island.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that there were pirates in the harbor and nearby.
Off the coast of Massachusetts and also New York. Blackbeard was a pirate out there, and there were privateers that were also hung as pirates.
Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about it as an immigration center, but before Ellis Island, immigrants still came into Manhattan, didn't they?
Oh yes, they came into Lower Manhattan at the Battery. There used to be Castle Gardens. That was the immigration center.
Yeah, I think that was from 1885 to around 1890.
Yes.
And they used the Castle Gardens, which, wasn't that a fort?
That was a fort, too. I believe it was Fort Clinton was there. There was a few other forts in the area. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that was called Gull Island. Ellis Island was called.
Now, it's been said that how many millions passed through and came into the New York Ellis Island?
Ellis Island, about 13 million immigrants came through.
And now, there's always been the idea that all immigrants came into Ellis Island, but they didn't coming to the United States, did they?
All around the United States. There were about 30 ports of entry. California, Texas, in the south, along the east, Boston was another port of entry.
I think in Savannah, too. On the
Savannah, Georgia.
Eastern
A lot of Irish come into Savannah, Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Now, when they came over, how long was the crossing? Was it
Crossing could be up to about 2 weeks.
2 weeks, but
2 weeks.
it wasn't a comfortable crossing.
No, usually, especially the steerage. There were 3 levels of passenger service. Top was the first class, then it was second class, and steerage was the poorest, lowest class of people. And the steamship companies got involved with this. This was their main source of revenue, just packing them into the steerage.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable.
And they had the most difficult passage.
Oh yes, no two ways about it.
Yes.
Can you imagine the frightening experience of leaving everything you have behind, starting out for a new world, not knowing what lay ahead of you, and severing your ties, religious, political, family, financial, business, and coming over to a world unknown. Couldn't even speak the language.
And I think there were several reasons. Part of it was political, was it?
Yeah, political.
And looking for more freedom. But a lot of it was the economy, wasn't it?
The economy, yes. They were destitute in a lot of cities and villages in Europe. And Central and Northwestern Europe was the focal point of all of the ports that led to the immigration process coming over.
Now, what did the potato famine, did that have a big
yes, it
effect
did.
on the people leaving?
Oh yes,
that time?
maybe up to 2 million people died in the potato famine, and millions more came across in the 20-year period from the 1840s to the 1860s. On a personal note, I just returned from Ellis Island, and it was a profound experience. And I recommend for the viewers to make it a point to visit Ellis Island. Over 100 million people in this country can trace their roots to Ellis Island.
A lot of famous people, I think.
Oh yeah, Albert Einstein. Sure. I saw the exhibits yesterday. Golda Meir, the premier of Israel, was a pioneer. She came over here as an immigrant. Rudolph Valentino, the actor.
Many people in the entertainment and the film world. I
oh
think.
yeah.
Irving Berlin, wasn't he one? And
Louis B. Mayer.
And
yeah.
the
many.
Hollywood people.
They made their contribution to the American way of life.
Yes.
From my own standpoint, I've had 5 grandparents, and they all came from Europe. 3 came from Germany, 1 came from Ireland, County Mayo, and 1 came from France, the Alsace-Lorraine region. That's from my grandfather.
Oh. Now let's get back to the passage. We said that the steerage class had the most difficult. What about the first class? They didn't have as rigid a requirement for entry, did they?
No. A lot of the paperwork and the medical work was done on the other side by the steamship companies and by the immigration offices. However, when they came to Ellis Island, the ships were moored out in the harbor, and the inspectors came aboard the ships, and they were sort of given a free pass, first and second class.
First and second.
It was the third class of passengers, the steerage, that really had the deep investigation so far as medical qualifications, their registration, what they were here about, and these were the ones that were really interrogated to the point where some were rejected.
Yes.
Some weren't allowed to come into the. Besides being physically and mentally equipped and having a sponsor to get into the United States, they also had to show some money. That could be $20 or $25, and they had to show that they were not going to become a ward of the government. And interestingly enough, some men and boys would come across and they would gamble away their money. And by the time they got to Ellis Island, they were desperate for money. And one of the favorite things that I read about was there was like a chain link fence where people passing through would pass 2 $10 bills through the gate to someone going to be examined having to declare proof of having $20. That same $20 would go through hundreds and hundreds of immigrants coming in. The same money would bring these people in.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the money, people were told that they have to be very careful with money they bring in because it would be stolen from them.
Absolutely.
And so what did the women do?
Probably sewed it in their
They
dresses.
sewed the money into their clothing, and therefore, when they came for the physical examination, they didn't want to take their clothes off because they thought we're going to lose the money.
Sure.
Yeah.
The sight of a person in uniform, a government official, an inspector, or a health doctor, programmer, was frightening and terrifying to some of these people that came from Europe, where a uniform meant authority and punishment.
Yeah. Now, all right, in the processing facility and the big great room and everything that they went through, but beyond that, there was another whole part of the island almost separated from this, with all of the facilities for everything else they needed.
Oh yeah, this was a self-contained city with 29 buildings.
Yeah.
The Great Hall and the large registration building was just one factor. Medical facilities, there was dining room facilities, a manifest with the ship's documents, with sponsorships. There was something like 30 different organizations within the United States that sponsored and helped immigrants get oriented. Jewish societies, Christian societies, Red Cross, even local groups went out of their way to indoctrinate new immigrants, because many immigrants came across and they set the tone for other immigrants and families to follow. And this was another interesting thing. Some cultures had the men go over first, the healthy men, to earn a living, to provide enough money to bring their families over. Other cases, the women went across because they knew people here and they knew they can get a job in a seamstress or working in a factory or things like that.
Yeah. Now, I think a lot of people have the idea that as soon as they got off Ellis Island, they all stayed in Lower New York.
No.
But that's not true.
No, it's not true.
In fact, states were advertising for California.
That's
had
right.
big posters and signs up offering incentives, in some cases land.
That's true.
For them to start farming, and they went to the Midwest and California and South. So they were spread out throughout the United States.
That's true.
Of course, at that time, not all states had joined the Union at the time.
That's
but
right.
They were the territories
Yep.
that they extended.
The vast immigration pool coming in, these were a lot of responsible people, hardworking, and they worked for minimum wage. So the mining industry, coal mines, out west, railroads, laborers, field laborers. I read a story about Andrew Cuomo's father, former governor of New York.
Yeah.
He came in as a ditch digger in New Jersey. He said he was so willing to work, and they asked him, there was 29 questions that they would ask. They would challenge these immigrants. And I saw the battery of tests yesterday, and I'm not sure if I could pass some of these tests, knowing the frustration and the anxiety that people had in mind at the time of the test.
Now we're coming to the time when, as we said, during World War I, it was almost shut down, and then started up again. And then in 1954, jumping all the way up to 1954, as an immigration center, it was closed.
Yep.
And what happened then?
Oh, some money was appropriated. I think it was raised nationally or perhaps government, and they decided to restore Ellis Island to its former glory.
But it was closed in 1954. Now, then, I think a lot of people really don't know what happened. When the facility was closed, nobody turned off the water. The pipes all froze, and water just seeped through and leaked down through the whole complex, the whole building, and ruined the plaster and the whatever supports and fillings, and even the outside of the building started. And then vandals went in.
Oh boy!
And what are they looking for?
Strip the pipes. Yeah.
Anything with
anything of value.
And it's a shame. It's hard to realize that a government facility like that would be allowed to deteriorate like that. Now, I was given permission when I had permission to photograph the Statue of Liberty. Right after that, I was given permission to go over to Ellis Island, because it was closed then, and I photographed through most of the processing center.
Yeah.
And I was just surprised at the deterioration and everything. But then, during the restoration of the Statue of Liberty, the amount that they collected for the statue was also included an amount for the restoration of Ellis Island, but they didn't advertise that very much when they made the appeals for the restoration of the Statue of Liberty. But $160 million was appropriated for restoring it, and they did a good job of restoring
Absolutely.
it.
It's worthwhile seeing.
And fortunately, they had enough of the old rooms, the offices with the old electric fans and cash registers and medical equipment and so on to save that. And now you were just there, so how did they display that now?
It's in large cases, and it's covered in mold, just the way it was removed from the original facilities before restoration, in a glass case, and you can marvel at the crutches and the wheelchairs and the baggage, and even a piano covered in mold. And there are period dress. There are showcases with the actual garments that the immigrants wore. And some of the pictures, they didn't all come in poverty-stricken. The men wore hats, which was a sign of, male chauvinism, we might say. And they wore stick pins, and they wore watch fobs and gold watches, and they also had ties. And they came in with their Sunday best. They wanted to make an impression so they could be admitted to the United States. And the women the same way, colorful dresses.
Well, I did go back after I photographed the deterioration and all the destruction, and I went back and I photographed the things that you just talked about.
Yeah.
And you'll see them in the pictures that we have here. Now, it wasn't until 1965 that both the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island was declared a national monument.
Right. It's interesting also, so far as the men and women were separated, right in the registration hall. Men to one side, women to another. Families were broken up. They never knew if they'd see their families again, because the real crisis of a family was someone being admitted and someone being deported. A family would be broken up forever. And sometimes when the families were reunited after they had both passed all the restrictions and they had been admitted, they were reunited at a place called the Kissing Post, or the Kissing Pole.
Yes.
And this is where they hugged and just met each other, and they could come together as a family and start their new life in America.
This is why it was sometimes called the Island of Tears.
Island of Hope, Island of Tears, yes.
Island of Tears. So that's kind of a coverage of the parts of Ellis Island that we have been looking into and investigating and photographing. And this will be made into a focus program, which we hope you'll all enjoy.
And I must say, your photographs are fantastic, really. One of a kind, some of these.
Well, thank you very much for your attention, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Thank you once again.